So I imagine, well, I hope many of you have at least heard of the Hunger Games books and movies. They've become a bit of a cultural phenomenon, the way Harry Potter did several years ago. But unlike Harry Potter's Hogwarts School for Ministry, nobody is too interested in visiting or living in the Panem, the fictional country where the Hunger Games is set. Those not familiar with Hunger Games stories, the stories are set in a dystopic future where the country of Panem includes 12 districts, and the capital has replaced the current countries of North America. There had been 13 districts, but a revolt led by that 13th district some years earlier resulted in its reported destruction by the capital. In an effort to avoid further conflicts, the capital instituted the Hunger Games, which forced two young people, they called it tributes, from each of the districts to fight in an elaborate arena until only one survived. In this way, the districts were reminded how powerless they were against the almighty capital. Plus, it added entertainment for the people of the capital. And they were quite the spectacle with elaborate opening ceremonies, past champions trotted out like show horses, and the residents of the capitals couldn't get enough of it. And the citizens of the capital, it should be noted, are obsessed with clothes, new hairstyles, elaborate makeup, and all things shiny and new. They had all the food they needed. They had life handed to them on a platter, while people in the districts, many of them, starved to death. The author of the books, Suzanne Collins, remarked in an interview that the inspiration for the books came after switching through the channels on her television. And on one channel, young people competing for some reality show for money and fame, while she continues switching channels, and there are young people dying at war. It reminded her of the ancient Roman custom of setting slave against slave in the arena for the amusement of the Roman citizens. The main character of the Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen is her name, is reportedly based on the character Theseus from Greek mythology, who was credited for unifying the territory of Attica under Athenian rule, under democratic rule. The primary source for the exploits of Theseus was written by Plutarch, and the Hunger Games series included a character named Plutarch whose videos much of Katniss's exploits in the second and third books of the series as she unifies the districts against the capital. Now, each of the 12 districts is known for a primary resource it provides to the capital: seafood, coal, lumber, manufacturing, agriculture, and even soldiers, called peacekeepers in a very Orwellian fashion. And what does the capital have? Power and money. And the citizens of the capital, their primary responsibility was to be consumers. They consume, they consume, they consume, while their government actively oppresses the people of the districts without question or concern. It was the Roman poet Juvenal, writing in the late 1st century and early 2nd century, that coined the phrase Panem et Circensus as a commentary on the Roman system of government. Panem et Circensus, literally bread and circuses, or bread and games. That was the formula used to keep the population of Rome peaceful and happy, while the emperor did as he pleased to expand his wealth and his influence. And the formula provided a variety of pleasures, the distribution of food, public baths, gladiators or exotic animals, chariot races, sporting competitions, and theater representation. All of which served to give the populace the illusion of a voice in society, as they were able to cheer for their favorite battle or even choose who lived and died in the arena. Panem et Circensus, Bread and Circuses, kept the citizens of the capital of Panem contented while their government did as it pleased, just as it did in Rome. And is it even the slightest leap of the imagination to compare what is going on in this country now and what happened in ancient Rome and what happened in fictional Panem? Is there a leap? Most popular TV shows, competition-based reality shows, right? American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, and then, of course, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, in which everybody loses, because nobody can keep up with the Kardashians. And you might be thinking, well, I don't watch those shows. You watch football? Baseball? Watch the Olympics? The Olympics this summer, watched some of them. Seems to me that was what was previously a coming together of the world to celebrate unity and peaceful competition is now just an opportunity for multinational corporations to vie for our attention, inviting us to consume, consume, consume. Now, funny thing about that word competition, it actually comes from the Latin, and the original meaning meant seeking or striving together. And what were they striving for? Excellence. In this way, all life is competition. We're striving together for growth, happiness, peace, and balance. Our modern usage of the word competition, however, maintains the striving part of the root. But instead of striving with, we're told to strive against. I do believe that some of the older attitudes about competition are maintained among some athletes, especially those that compete as amateurs on the world stage, who recognize that they cannot achieve their personal best, they cannot achieve personal excellence, except in the presence of others doing the same. That was the Olympic spirit. And it comes from a different place in us. It's a different motivation. Is the goal personal excellence, personal satisfaction, personal happiness, or is the goal external fame, external wealth, and power? In the winner-take-all mentality that dominates our culture, I think we've lost sight of the fact that life and living requires cooperation, requires community, requires all of us striving together for common good. Because the goal of Panem et Circensus, the goal of Bread and Circuses, it has a different goal. It's here to distract and divide. when we are constantly and continually conditioned to seek external rewards and approval through mass consumption of material good, when we are so focused on what others think about us, keeping up with the Kardashians, then by default, we are ignoring our own internal life, our personal thoughts and feelings, a personal drive for health and happiness and well-being. Consider for a moment all that's going on in our world today. Global climate change, the rising disparity between rich and poor and black and white. Black men and women, Native American men and women are being beaten and killed by police with impunity. They are being imprisoned at ridiculously high rates. And this is quite okay for the vast majority of our citizens. But if a football player doesn't stand for the national anthem, everyone's up in arms. Oh my God! It's everywhere. Consider all the ways our system of government no longer qualifies as democracy, ruled by the people. It moves closer and closer toward oligarchy, ruled by the few. How can my single vote matter given the millions of dollars donated by anonymous corporations? And all this is going on while we entertain ourselves to death. I mean, let's be real. What's more important? Who wins American Idol? Who will be the next president of the United States? What is more important? Who might win next year's Super Bowl or the environmental impact of the Dakota Access Pipeline? If we as a nation do not wake up to the reality of our situation, where countless hours of primetime television are spent speculating on who might win the Super Bowl next January or February, whenever it is. Countless hours spent just on speculation. While you have to go look for news about the resistance in Dakota, the Dakota Territory, about the Access Pipeline. You have to go look for it. If we as a nation do not wake up to this reality, if we do not wake up to our responsibilities as citizens, as conscious beings, inexorably linked to our environment, to each other and all of nature, if we do not wake to this reality, then we will fall as Rome fell. We will find ourselves in the same circumstances that led to the formation of Panem. Remember that picture? It was a lot of this country, a lot of this continent was underwater. And there were a lot less people living in that world. So what do? How do we wake up? What's the cure? How do we inoculate ourselves against bread and circuses? What do we do? What do we do as individuals? What do we do as a spiritual community? I'm here talking about it here because I believe the answer to that is spiritual in nature. Now, spirituality, as I see it, is the pursuit of ever greater self-awareness and connection. Spirituality is the striving towards greater community, greater commitment, greater communication. Spirituality is the striving together towards shared goals. Now, I know many Unitarian Universalists do not like the word and believe it suggestive of otherworldly beings. But if we look to see how the word is being used in our culture, we'll see that that isn't necessarily the case. According to the Pew Research report, 20% of Americans, 1/5 of the adult population, describe themselves as religiously unaffiliated. And the percentage is higher for young people, up to 72% for Generation Y, for our millennials. The Buddhist magazine, Lion's Roar, they pointed out that about 1/3 of the religiously unaffiliated describe themselves as atheists. But the rest, some 30 million Americans, maintain some type of spiritual belief and practice, even though they no longer feel at home in a church or a synagogue or mosque. These are the famous spiritual but not religious. Philosophically, the fastest growing demographic in the United States, and generally they're educated, liberal, and open-minded with a deep sense of connection to the earth and a belief that there's more to life than what appears on the surface. When we do look around what's going on in our world today, we see a growing disconnect with the status quo. There's a growing discontent with the Bread and Circuses approach to American politics. Maybe not in the majority, but in the minority there is a growing discontent. We saw that in our presidential race. We see it in Black Lives Matter, in Dakota Access Pipeline resistance. We saw it in New York and around the country a few years ago in the Occupy movement. Thank you. These people, they're reclaiming their personal, religious, and political power. They are tuning in to their own inherent worth and dignity. They are reconnecting with that interconnected web of life. Well-known pagan author, global activist Starhawk writes in her book, Webs of Power, Notes from the Global Uprising. She writes, that word power comes from a root that means ability. We each have a different kind of power. The power that comes from within, our ability to dare, to do, to dream, our creativity. Power from within is unlimited, she says, because if I have the power to write, it doesn't diminish your power. In fact, my writing might inspire you or illuminate your thinking. Power over, on the other hand, seems invincible, but ultimately it rests upon the compliance of those it controls. No system of power can afford to use force to enforce its decrees. Instead, the fear of that force causes us to repress and police ourselves. That's why dogs are used. Because they instill fear. So next time, the presence of a dog at a resistance rise up. Those images from the Dakota Access Pipeline, from the Civil Rights Movement. Darha continues, if we refuse to comply, if we call the legitimacy of the system into question, ultimately the system cannot stand. She also reminds us that power from within is akin to what many cultures call spirit. Spirituality is taking back our power, taking back our ability for self-determination, our antidote for bread and circuses that is being used to distract and divide. Included in the book, Everyday Spiritual Practices, Simple Pathways for Enriching Your Life, is an essay called Social Justice. And in that essay, the authors, Art MacDonald, Deborah Holder, and Stephen Furrer, make a similar point. They say justice-making and spiritual wholeness go hand in hand. Two sides of the same coin. What begins as mysticism ends in social action. This understanding of spiritual practice includes engagement with the world, not withdrawal from it. They also point out that the African feminist theologian Mercy Amba Oduyoye confirms this holistic understanding when she defines spirituality as simply the energy by which one lives and which links one's worldview to one's style of life. This is a simple, direct explanation of the spiritual life. Yet one that speaks directly to the oneness at the center of our being. Now, I'm not trying to say that spirituality is an easy fix-all for everything. Because it's not easy. Living a truly and deeply spiritual life is one of the hardest things to do. It takes serious work and commitment. It takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes a lifetime. The rewards are worth the effort. Darhark writes, when we know what we stand for and are willing to risk ourselves for what is most deeply important to us, when we're willing to risk that, what most profoundly nourishes and inspires us, then we know what is truly sacred. All we need to do then is to put our life energies, our time, our creativity at its disposal, however we name and describe it. Then the great powers of the universe, inner and outer, seen and unseen, move in alignment, and as agents of embodied love, we are fed and nourished. Native American people from around the country who are now uniting and standing as one against the Dakota Access Pipeline to save our water protectors, to save our planet. Their strength and determination is coming from their spirituality, their identity as who they are. It's coming from deep within them, and the powers that be should be scared. Because this power does not run from the guns, the attack dogs, and the threats of violence. It gets stronger, and it grows, and inspires more. There is nothing in this world more powerful than peaceful, nonviolent action. Gandhi recognized this, as did Martin Luther King Jr. This is why, since the 1960s, the government has done everything in its power to quell all nonviolent movements, yet do virtually nothing when armed gunmen take over a government building. They aren't worried about armed insurrections. They aren't. The battle over open carry and access to semi-automatic weapons. The government has drones and tanks. They aren't worried about that. They are worried about the nonviolent revolution that is welling up. This country was born in violence. It is bathed in it. The bread and circuses that serve to distract and divide the mass of Americans today is not going away anytime soon. And as Unitarian Universalists, we have an opportunity to help people wake to reality. Wake to what is really going on in our world. I know in many ways I'm preaching to the choir here. But there's a lot of people out there that are on the verge of waking up. And we have an opportunity to help people wake to their own inherent worth and dignity, their connection to that interconnected web of life. It's a big-ass job. It's a scary job. I only hope that we're up for it. So be it. Amen. Blessed be.